wearing an elegant black dress, as if she had dressed up for an important business meeting. Marcus seemed nervous, adjusting his tie over and over and looking around my modest apartment with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. It was clear Sarah had told him something, but not everything. "Before we start," I said, serving them tea in my chipped mugs, "I need you to understand something very important. The conversation we're going to have tonight cannot leave these four walls. There are powerful people involved, and your financial future depends on your ability to keep secrets." Marcus cleared his throat. "Mr. Chen, Sarah told me you know people who could help us with our financial situation. We deeply appreciate any help you can give, but we don't want to get you into trouble for us." What a sweet, honest young man. His genuine concern for my safety contrasted dramatically with the poorly hidden greed I saw in Sarah's eyes. "Marcus," I said softly, "how much has Sarah told you about my work history?" He looked nervously at his girlfriend. "She said you worked for an important company years ago, and that maybe you know influential people who could help us get a loan." It was a heavily edited version of the truth, and I could see that Sarah had been careful not to reveal her wilder theories about my identity. "It's more complicated than that," I said, standing up to close my apartment curtains. The gesture was purely for show, but I saw how both of them tensed up. "For years, I worked fixing things in the offices of one of the most powerful companies in the country. But my job wasn't just fixing things. It was observing, listening, reporting. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes shining. "Reporting what? To whom?" Her voice was barely a whisper, as if we were finally getting to the heart of the mystery that had been torturing her for weeks. "Financial problems, private conversations, meetings that officially never happened." I paused, letting the tension build. My direct boss was not the maintenance supervisor. It was Chen himself. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Marcus blinked, confused, clearly not understanding what this meant, but Sarah turned white as a ghost. "Are you saying you worked directly for RJ Chen?" Her voice broke on the last word. "For more than 12 years, I confirmed, watching her hands begin to tremble. "My official job was nighttime maintenance. My real job was to be his eyes and ears in an industry full of lies and stealing." It was a carefully made-up lie, but with enough pieces of truth to be believable. Marcus still didn't fully understand. "Mr. Chen, are you saying you were like a private spy?" His innocence was refreshing, contrasting with the way Sarah was frantically calculating what she had just heard. "It was more than that," I said, deciding to give Sarah exactly what she had been waiting to hear. "During all those years, RJ Chen paid me very generously for my discretion. And when I stopped doing that job, I made sure I had enough resources to live comfortably for the rest of my life." Sarah practically leaped out of her seat. "How much?" she asked bluntly. "How much money do you have?" Her mask of daughterly concern had completely disappeared, replaced by pure greed that hurt me to see, even though I had expected it. "Enough," I replied calmly, "to solve your financial crisis several times over. But the question isn't how much I have. The question is what you're willing to do to earn it." Marcus looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Mr. Chen, we don't want your money as a gift. We're willing to work to pay interest, to give you something valuable as security. We just need help getting through this tough time." But Sarah was already beyond politeness and good manners. "What kind of things would we have to do?" She asked directly. "What do you want in exchange for the money?" Her eyes shone with desperate hope and something darker, the willingness to do almost anything to get out of her crisis. It was the perfect moment for the final test. For weeks, I had been planting doubt and suspicion, building a story that explained all the mysterious things about my life. Now it was time to see what kind of person my daughter truly was when faced with the possibility of financial salvation. "Sarah," I said slowly, "for years you have treated me as if I were invisible. You have insulted me, humiliated me, and publicly made fun of me. Last week you called me a fat pig in front of 200 people. I watched her flinch at my words. "But now that you suspect I have money, suddenly I'm the most important father in the world." Her cheeks turned red. "Dad, I'm so sorry for how I've treated you. If I could go back in time and change my behavior, I would. Please don't let my past mistakes affect our future." "Our future," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Or your financial future." The difference was important, and I wanted both of them to understand exactly what was at stake here. Marcus stepped in, clearly sensing the tension between Sarah and me. Mr. Chen, I understand Sarah hasn't always been the most attentive daughter, but she's really been dealing with a lot of stress lately. Our financial problems have been overwhelming, and perhaps that has affected her behavior. It was a sweet but naive defense. Marcus still didn't understand that Sarah's cruel behavior toward me had begun decades before they had money problems. Marcus, I said gently, I appreciate you defending your girlfriend, but I need you to understand something. If I'm going to help you financially, I need guarantees that my generosity won't be misinterpreted or misused. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes shining with anticipation. What kind of guarantees? We'll do whatever it takes. We'll sign any document. We'll accept any condition. Her willingness to accept unknown terms without even asking for details told me everything I needed to know about her state of mind. Very well, I said, getting up to go to the desk where I had prepared some documents specifically for this moment. I've been preparing a proposal that could solve all your financial problems. But before I show it to you, I need to know, are you prepared for permanent changes in your relationship with me? What kind of changes? Marcus asked cautiously, but Sarah was already nodding before hearing the answer. The kind of changes, I said, returning with a folder in my hands. That will determine whether you truly value family over money, or if money is the only thing that makes you value family. And with those words, I placed the folder on the table, knowing that what it contained would change everything between us forever, one way or another. I opened the folder slowly, revealing documents I had carefully prepared over the past few weeks. On the first page was a contract that looked completely official, with legal stamps and signatures I had carefully created. The heading read, Conditional Financial Transfer Agreement, and it was dated just 2 days prior. This, I said, placing the document in front of them, is a proposal I've been negotiating with my contacts since our last conversation. Sarah grabbed the paper like a hawk grabbing its prey, her eyes quickly reading the lines while Marcus read over her shoulder with an increasingly worried expression. The document they were studying contained specific terms. A transfer of $500,000 to cover all their debts plus $100,000 for moving expenses, in exchange for conditions I had designed to test exactly what kind of people they truly were. First condition, Sarah read aloud, her voice shaking slightly. Complete transfer of all current personal belongings as temporary security guarantee. She looked up at me. This means we would have to transfer the house, the cars, everything into your name. Temporarily, I said, watching their reactions carefully. Just until you prove you can responsibly manage such a large amount of money. It's a standard protection in these types of deals. Marcus frowned. Mr. Chen, that would leave us completely dependent on your goodwill. What happens if something happens to you? What guarantees do we have? It was a smart question that showed Marcus, unlike Sarah, was thinking beyond the immediate solution. Second condition, Sarah continued, ignoring her boyfriend's concern. Immediate moving to a city of my choice with limited family contact during a 3-year trial period. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus went pale. Limited family contact? What exactly does that mean? His voice had lost all its usual politeness and now sounded genuinely alarmed. It means, I said calmly, that for 3 years you would live in a city I would choose, in a house I would provide, with a monthly allowance that I would determine. Family visits would be restricted to pre-approved occasions, and all communication with me would go through other people. Sarah was frantically reading the rest of the document. Third condition, voluntary giving up of all future inheritance rights. Her voice cracked slightly as she read that line. You're saying that if we accept this money, we give up any inheritance you might leave us. Exactly, I confirmed. This would be your one and only financial benefit from our family relationship. After this, you would be financially independent, and I would be free of any future obligation to you. Marcus suddenly stood up from the couch, his face red with anger. Mr. Chen, with all due respect, this isn't a loan or family help. This is like buying our freedom. His voice trembled with emotion. You're offering us money in exchange for essentially cutting off all family ties. But Sarah continued to study the document with hungry eyes. How much would the monthly allowance be? She asked, completely ignoring her boyfriend's protest. And what kind of house would you provide? The difference in their reactions was exactly what I had expected and feared. Marcus saw the proposal for what it was, a cruel test disguised as generosity. Sarah saw only the numbers and the financial possibilities. The allowance would be $3,000 a month, I replied, watching Sarah's eyes light up with greed. The house would be modest but comfortable in a small town where the cost of living is low. You could live comfortably but not extravagantly. Sarah, Marcus turned to his girlfriend, his voice full of disbelief. Are you really considering this? Talking about accepting money in exchange for cutting ties with your own father? He ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling to stay calm. This isn't right. Something about this whole situation is wrong. Sarah finally looked up from the document. Marcus, listen to me. We're about to lose everything. The house, the cars, our reputation, our future. My dad is offering us a way out. Her eyes shone with desperation that broke my heart. 3 years isn't forever. We could take the money, settle in a new city, build a new life. And after 3 years, what? Marcus asked, his voice full of pain. We come back as strangers. Your father becomes someone you used to know. Our future children grow up without knowing their grandfather. His questions cut through the air like blades, exposing exactly what was at stake. I got up and walked toward the window, giving them space to argue but staying close enough to hear every word. This was the conversation I had been waiting for, the moment when their true values would surface under extreme pressure. Marcus, Sarah said in a softer voice, my relationship with my dad is already broken. A week ago, I called him a fat pig in public. Years before that, I treated him as if he were invisible. Maybe this is what I deserve. Maybe it's time for me to pay for my mistakes. Don't say that, Marcus exclaimed. Past mistakes can be fixed, families can be healed, but what your father is proposing isn't healing, it's amputation. He turned to me. Mr. Chen, I understand that Sarah has hurt you deeply, but this isn't justice. This is revenge. His words hit me harder than I had expected. Marcus had identified exactly what I had been denying to myself. That part of my proposal came from a desire for revenge, not love. Marcus, I said softly, turning to face them, what do you suggest then? That I give them the money unconditionally? That I allow Sarah to continue treating me like a human ATM machine? I suggest, Marcus said firmly, that we find a way to heal the relationship between the two of you without involving money. I suggest that Sarah work to earn your forgiveness through actions, not financial transactions. Sarah suddenly stood up, the document trembling in her hands. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who's going to lose everything. Her eyes filled with tears of frustration. You don't understand what it's like to live with the shame of having publicly humiliated the only person who truly loves you. Her voice cracked. At least with this agreement, we could start over. We could build something real. Build what? Marcus asked desperately. A life based on money stained with the blood of a destroyed family relationship. He turned to me again. Mr. Chen, you've been intelligent and successful all your life. Surely you can see that this won't bring peace to anyone. It was a crucial moment. I could continue my act and let them choose, knowing that Sarah would probably accept the terms and Marcus might possibly leave her because of it. Or I could use this moment to reveal the truth about who I really was and why I had created this whole elaborate test. There's a fourth condition, I said finally, that isn't written in the document. Both of them looked at me with tense expectation. Before you sign anything, before you make any decision, I need to tell you the whole truth about who I really am. Sarah let the document fall onto the table. What truth? There's more. Her voice was barely a whisper, as if she finally realized she had been playing a game whose rules she didn't fully understand. The truth, I said, walking toward my desk to pull out a different folder, is that I don't need special contacts to get that money. The truth is that document you just read is completely fake. I returned with the real folder, the one that contained the documents that would prove my true identity. And the truth is, yes, Sarah, I am exactly who Mr. Jackson thought I was at your party. The silence that followed was so deep I could hear the tick-tock of the old clock on the kitchen wall. Sarah and Marcus looked at me as if I had just revealed I was an alien from outer space. And in a way, I suppose to them, R.J. Chen might as well have been from another planet. For the last 30 years, I continued, opening the real folder, I have built a business empire valued at more than $150 million. And all this time, you've been living less than 2 miles from one of the richest men in the country. The folder I opened contained real documents this time. Actual bank statements with my real name, company ownership papers, purchase contracts signed by my own hand, and photographs of business meetings where I was clearly identified as RJ Chen. Sarah picked up the first document with hands that shook so much she could barely hold it. Checking account, Robert James Chen. She read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. Current balance. The paper slipped from her fingers as if it were on fire. This is real. Marcus leaned over to see for himself, his face pale as paper. Mr. Chen, he corrected himself, clearly struggling to process the information. You really are. He couldn't finish the question. I am exactly who Mr. Jackson recognized at your party, I confirmed, spreading more documents on the table. These are the purchase contracts for his family business. This is my signature. These are the bank transfer receipts for $32 million. Every document I placed down was like a reality bomb exploding in their minds. Sarah collapsed onto the couch, her eyes darting between the documents as if she couldn't focus on any of them. But you live in this horrible apartment. You wear cheap clothes. You take the bus. Her voice cracked. Why live like this if you have all this money? It was the question I had been waiting decades to answer. Because, I said, sitting across from her, after your mother died, I decided I would never be vulnerable again. I decided I would build an empire so solid that no one, not even my own daughter, could hurt me financially. I paused, letting those words sink in. But I also decided I would live simply so I would never lose sight of what truly matters in life. Marcus continued to study the documents with an expression of growing amazement. Mr. Chen, these companies. I've heard of these companies. You own the restaurant chain that saved my uncle from losing his business. You're the one who bought the furniture factory where my aunt works. His voice filled with new respect. You've been saving jobs all over the city for years. Not just in this city, I said softly, in 9 different states. I have bought companies in crisis, fixed them, and turned them into successful operations that employ more than 40,000 people. It was the first time I had talked about my real work with anyone in my family, and it felt strangely freeing. Sarah finally looked up from the documents, tears streaming down her cheeks. 30 years, she murmured. For 30 years you've been watching me hate you, insult you, treat you like you were invisible. And all this time, her voice broke completely. All this time, you were more successful than anyone I've ever known. More successful, I corrected gently, but apparently not very successful as a father. The words hurt to say, but they needed to be spoken. Marcus sat down heavily, covering his face with his hands. Oh God, Mr. Chen, when I think of the things Sarah has said about you to my family, the excuses she made up to explain why we never included you in social events. He removed his hands from his face, looking at me with eyes full of guilt. We judged you so harshly. We thought you were a burden to Sarah. You didn't judge me, I said firmly. I chose this image. I decided to keep my true identity a secret. What you saw is exactly what I wanted you to see. I took another document from the folder. But it also means that every humiliation, every insult, every moment I was treated as less than human was a choice Sarah made without any outside pressure. Sarah doubled over, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm sorry, she repeated through her tears. I'm so incredibly sorry. There are no words to describe how awful I feel. There's no way to undo the damage I've caused. You're right, I said calmly. There's no way to undo it, but there are ways to move forward. I got up and went to the desk once more, returning with a different document. This is my real will, Sarah. Would you like to know what it says? Her eyes widened in terror. Dad, no matter what it says, I deserve to be cut out. I deserve for you to remove me from your life completely. It says, I continued, ignoring her protests, that upon my death, 70% of my fortune will go to charity foundations I've been secretly funding for years. Shelters for homeless families, educational programs for children from poor neighborhoods, scholarships for young business owners. I paused. The remaining 30% was intended for you and your future children. Was, Marcus noted immediately, recognizing the past tense. No longer, I said, looking directly at Sarah. After the humiliation at your party, I wrote a new will. Now 100% goes to charity. I watched those words hit her like a physical slap. Because I realized that giving you money after my death would only validate your belief that money is more important than relationships. Sarah stood up swaying, her legs barely holding her up. It's okay, she whispered. It's completely okay. You have every right to cut me out, but please, her voice broke. Please don't cut me out of your life while you're still alive. I don't care about the money anymore. I just want the chance to be a real daughter to you." "A real daughter?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Like the real daughter who introduced me as a fat pig 2 weeks ago." Marcus stepped toward Sarah, putting his arms around her as she cried. "Mr. Chen," he said in a firm but respectful voice, "I understand your pain and your anger. Sarah has been terrible to you, and there are no excuses for her behavior. But she's your daughter, and you're her father. There has to be some way to heal this relationship." "Is there?" I asked genuinely. "How do you heal a relationship when one person has spent decades showing that the only love they understand is love based on conditions?" Sarah pulled away from Marcus and came toward me, falling to her knees in front of my chair. "Dad, I understand I have no right to ask you for anything. I understand I've been a monster to you for years. But if you give me a chance, just one chance, I promise I will spend the rest of my life proving to you who I can really be." "And what about your financial problems?" I asked. "Do you still expect me to help you pay off your debts?" Marcus and Sarah looked at each other, and I saw a silent message pass between them. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Mr. Chen, we will solve our financial problems ourselves. We will sell everything we own. We will move to a small apartment. We will work any job we can get. We don't want your money." "He's right," said this new Sarah, the one who had just discovered she had been hatting one of the most powerful men in the country. "It's not about the money anymore, Dad. It's about whether there's any way you can forgive me." It was the moment I had been waiting for years. But now that it had arrived, I felt less victorious and more exhausted than I had anticipated. "Sarah," I said softly, "forgiveness isn't something you earn in one conversation. It's something you build through consistent actions over a long time." "Then tell me what to do," she pleaded. "Tell me how to start." "You start," I said, helping her up from the floor, "by publicly admitting what you did at your party. You start by apologizing to every person who was present when you humiliated me. And you start by treating me with respect, not because you now know I have money, but because I'm your father and I always deserved respect." Sarah nodded violently. "I will do that. I will do all of that and more." "And I said, collecting all the documents and putting them back in the folder, "need time to decide if I truly believe you can change, or if this is just another performance designed to get what you want." The truth was that after decades of hiding behind a false identity, I wasn't sure who I really was anymore. Robert, the invisible man, or Chen, the ruthless businessman. And until I knew, I couldn't make any decisions about the future of my relationship with Sarah. 6 months after that night that changed everything, I found myself standing in front of the mirror in my new apartment, an elegant penthouse downtown that finally reflected my true financial position. I no longer wore thrift store shirts or took the bus to get to work. My hair was professionally cut. I wore simple but elegant watches and my clothes were designer brands. For the first time in 30 years, Robert Chen and RJ Chen were the same person. The change had been harder than I expected. For decades, fake poverty had been my armor, my way of keeping money-hungry people away from my real life. Now, living openly as the successful man I was, I had to deal with a completely different world of social relationships and family expectations. Sarah had kept her word in ways I never would have imagined. 1 week after our big revelation, she organized a dinner for Marcus's entire family, including Mr. Jackson and the 200 closest guests from her party. At that dinner, in front of everyone who had witnessed my humiliation, Sarah stood up and read an apology she had written by hand. "6 months ago," she had said, her voice trembling but clear, "I publicly humiliated the most important man in my life. I called my father a fat pig in front of all of you, laughing as if his pain were entertainment." Words had cut through the air of the elegant restaurant like blades. What I didn't know, is that my father is one of the most successful businessmen in this state. But that's not what makes my behavior unforgivable. What makes it unforgivable is that he's my father, and I chose cruelty over love. It had been one of the bravest and most humbling moments I had ever witnessed. Sarah cried throughout the apology, but she didn't stop until she finished every word she had written. Mr. Jackson had cried too, apologizing for having laughed at me that night. The change at the tables had been clear, from cruel amusement to collective shame. But the public apologies were only the beginning. Sarah and Marcus had sold their elegant house, their luxury cars, and all the expensive possessions they had collected. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood, and both got modest jobs, Sarah as a receptionist at a dental clinic, Marcus as a junior accountant at a small company. For the first few months, they rejected every offer of financial help I made. When I offered to pay off their debts, Marcus firmly said, "Mr. Chen, we need to prove to ourselves and to you that we can be responsible without your money." When Sarah first came to my office building, gasping at the 30-story building that was my headquarters, she asked me for only one thing. "Show me how you built all of this. I don't want your money. I want to learn to create my own." And so began the strangest part of this whole story, teaching my 31-year-old daughter how to be a functional adult. During our weekly lunches, which began as tense meetings in neutral coffee shops and gradually moved to more personal restaurants, Sarah asked me questions that broke my heart. How did you know which investments to make? How did you make business decisions without emotion? How did you maintain discipline for years without seeing immediate results? What impacted me most was the realization that Sarah had never learned those skills because I had never taught them to her. During her childhood and teenage years, I had been so busy building my secret empire that I had left her financial and emotional education to chance. In a way, her materialism and cruelty were symptoms of an upbringing where money was mysterious and magical, something that appeared or disappeared without clear explanation. The turning point came 3 months after our revelation. Sarah arrived at our weekly lunch with something I had never seen in her eyes before, genuine pride not based on material possessions. "Dad," she said, smiling in a way I hadn't seen since she was a little girl, "this month Marcus and I paid all our bills without using credit cards. It's the first time in my adult life that has happened." It was a small achievement by most standards, but for Sarah it represented a fundamental transformation. "And," she continued, "we have something to tell you." Marcus, who now visited me regularly and had developed a genuinely loving relationship with me, took her hand. "We're expecting a baby." The news hit me like lightning. I was going to be a grandfather. After years of accepting a lonely old age, I suddenly had the prospect of a real family. "And what are your plans?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "We want to raise him differently," Sarah said immediately. "We want him to meet his grandfather from the day he's born. We want him to understand the value of hard work and humility. And we want him to know that family love is unconditional." It was at that moment that I made the decision I had been putting off for months. "There's something I need to tell you," I said, opening my bag to pull out a document I had been carrying with me for weeks. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about what I want to do with my fortune." Sarah tensed immediately. "Dad, if this is about inheritance, we already told you we don't want your money." "It's not about inheritance," I said softly. "It's about something more important." I placed the document on the table. "It's the charter of the Chen Jackson Family Foundation. I've decided to convert half of my fortune into a charity foundation that will be run by the next generations of our family." Marcus studied the document with careful eyes. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means," I explained, "that when my grandson or granddaughter grows up, they will have the opportunity to learn about financial responsibility by managing resources to help others. It means that Sarah can develop her own career in helping people if she wishes. And it means that none of you will ever be rich by inheritance, but you will always have the opportunity to make a difference in the world." Sarah began to cry, but this time they were tears of gratitude, not desperation. "It's perfect," she whispered. "It's exactly what our baby needs: purpose without privilege, opportunity without ease." Over the following months, we worked together designing the foundation's programs. Sarah turned out to have a natural talent for identifying community needs and developing practical solutions. Marcus contributed financial management skills that perfectly complemented her passion. For the first time in decades, I felt like I had a real family, not perfect, but genuine. The day my grandson, James Robert Jackson, was born, I held that tiny creature in my arms and made a silent promise. He would grow up knowing exactly who his grandfather was, both Robert Chen and RJ Chen, from day one. There would be no secrets, no false identities, no shame about success or humility. Now, when I look back at that terrible night at Sarah's party, when she called me a fat pig in front of 200 people, I can see that it was the catalyst we needed for a transformation that never would have been possible without pain. Sarah had to hit rock bottom to learn to value what truly matters. I had to risk total loss to discover what I was really willing to fight to keep. The question I ask myself now, as I look toward the future with hope I hadn't felt in decades, is this. In your own families, in your own lives, have you had the courage to be completely honest about who you really are? Or are you still hiding parts of yourselves out of fear, protection, or pride? Because the truth I learned, though painful, is that there can be no real love where there are fundamental secrets. And in the end, real love, not money, is the only thing that truly holds us together when everything else falls apart. My grandson James is now 6 months old. Last week, I took him to my office building for the first time. Sarah and Marcus came with us, and I watched them explain to my employees that this was the newest member of the Chen family. The pride in Sarah's voice as she introduced her son to people who work for me was something I never thought I'd hear. We're not a perfect family. There are still moments when old wounds resurface, when Sarah says something that reminds me of her cruelty, when I catch myself being too guarded with my emotions. But we're real now. We're honest. And we're trying. Last month, Sarah made a suggestion that surprised me. "Dad," she said during one of our lunches, "I think you should write a book about your journey. Not for money or fame, but because there might be other people out there, other janitors, other maintenance workers, other invisible people, who need to know that their circumstances don't define their potential." I'm considering it. Not because I want recognition, but because she's right. For 30 years, I listened and learned while the world overlooked me. Maybe my story could inspire others to see opportunities where others see only obstacles. The Chen Jackson Family Foundation officially launched 3 months ago. Our first project is providing business education to working-class adults who never had the opportunity to learn financial literacy. Sarah runs the program with a passion I've never seen in her before. She meets with students twice a week, sharing not just business knowledge but her own story of transformation, from a spoiled, cruel daughter to someone dedicated to helping others. Marcus has become my unofficial deputy at several of my companies. He has a good head for numbers and a genuine concern for employee welfare. His father, Mr. Jackson, has also become a close friend. We meet monthly to discuss business strategy, but mostly we talk about our children and grandchildren. It's strange how a moment of recognition at a party transformed not just my relationship with my daughter, but expanded my entire family network. But perhaps the most unexpected gift came from an unlikely source. 2 weeks ago, I received a letter from one of Sarah's friends who was at that party 6 months ago, one of the women who laughed when Sarah called me a fat pig. The letter was an apology, but it was more than that. She explained that watching Sarah's public apology and subsequent transformation had forced her to examine her own relationship with her parents. She had been treating them with similar contempt, embarrassed by their modest means and simple lifestyle. Sarah's courage in admitting her mistakes had inspired this woman to change her own behavior. She ended the letter by thanking me, not for being rich, but for being a father who loved his daughter enough to give her a second chance even when she didn't deserve it. That letter sits framed in my office now, not because I'm proud of myself, but because it reminds me that our actions, both good and bad, ripple outward in ways we can never fully predict. Sarah's cruelty hurt me deeply, but her redemption has apparently inspired others. My transformation from invisible maintenance man to visible businessman has challenged people's assumptions about worth and value. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Mr. Jackson hadn't recognized me at that party. Would Sarah have continued her cruel treatment indefinitely? Would I have remained hidden forever, accumulating wealth in secret while living in deliberate poverty? Would we have missed the chance to build this new, honest relationship? I'll never know the answers to those questions, and perhaps that's for the best. What matters is what actually happened and what we chose to do with it. Yesterday, Sarah called me with excitement in her voice. "Dad, I just had my first business idea that I actually think could work." She explained a concept for a social enterprise that would employ people transitioning out of homelessness, teaching them maintenance and repair skills while providing affordable services to low-income homeowners. It was a brilliant idea that combined profit with purpose, business acumen with compassion. "What do you think?" she asked nervously. "Do you think it could work?" I smiled, remembering all the years I had listened to business executives pitch ideas in those late-night office meetings. "I think it's excellent," I told her honestly. "And I think you should develop a full business plan. Not because I'll fund it. You should seek traditional investors to prove the concept has merit beyond family connections, but because it's genuinely worth pursuing." The silence on the other end of the phone lasted several seconds. Then Sarah said something that brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you for believing in me as a person, not just as your daughter. Thank you for making me earn this instead of just giving it to me." That's when I knew, truly knew, that the change in Sarah was real. She wasn't performing anymore. She had genuinely transformed from someone who valued money above all else to someone who understood that self-respect and earned achievement matter more than inherited wealth. Marcus called me later that evening with his own news. He had been offered a senior position at a mid-sized accounting firm, a job that would pay well and offer real career advancement. "But I wanted to ask your permission first," he said respectfully. "I know you were considering promoting me within your companies, and I don't want to seem ungrateful." "Marcus," I said firmly, "you don't need my permission to build your own career. In fact, I'm proud that you're making independent choices rather than waiting for handouts from family connections. Take the job, excel at it, build something that's yours, not mine." I could hear the relief in his voice. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. That means everything to me." After we hung up, I sat in my penthouse apartment, no longer pretending to be poor, no longer hiding who I truly was, and felt a profound sense of peace. For 30 years, I had built an empire in secret, protecting myself through deception and separation. I had convinced myself that hiding was safety, that invisibility was power. But the truth I've learned through this painful, beautiful journey with Sarah is that real power comes from vulnerability. Real safety comes from honest relationships. And real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the quality of connections we build with the people we love. My grandson James will grow up in a very different world than Sarah did. He'll know from the beginning that his grandfather is both a wealthy businessman and a simple man who values hard work. He'll understand that money is a tool, not a measure of human worth. He'll learn that respect must be earned through character, not commanded through wealth or status. Most importantly, he'll grow up in a family that values truth over comfort, where difficult conversations are welcomed rather than avoided, where mistakes are acknowledged rather than hidden. Last week, I did something I never thought I would do. I went back to one of the office buildings where I used to work as a maintenance man. Not to work, but to meet with the current maintenance staff. I wanted to tell them what I tell you now. Never let anyone make you feel invisible. Never let your circumstances define your potential. Pay attention, learn constantly, and understand that every person you meet, from the CEO to the janitor, has something valuable to teach you if you're willing to listen. One young maintenance worker, a woman about 25 years old, approached me afterward. "Mr. Chen," she said quietly, "I've been taking online business courses at night, just like you did with those books you found. But sometimes I feel stupid, like I'm reaching for something I'll never achieve." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw myself 30 years ago. "Let me tell you something," I said. "The people who succeed aren't the ones who never feel stupid or afraid. They're the ones who feel those things and keep going anyway. Don't stop learning. Don't stop trying. And most importantly, don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you that your current circumstances are your permanent destiny." She thanked me with tears in her eyes, and I gave her my business card. Not to offer her a job or money, but to offer her something more valuable, the knowledge that someone believes in her potential. That's what I've learned through this entire experience. Money can solve certain problems, but it can't buy the things that matter most: respect, genuine love, self-worth, purpose. Sarah had access to my money through her expectations of inheritance, but it made her entitled and cruel. Only when she lost that access and had to rebuild from nothing did she discover who she really was and who she could become. I had access to vast wealth but chose to live in poverty, and that choice, while it protected me in some ways, also isolated me and damaged my relationship with my daughter. Only when I revealed the truth and made myself vulnerable did real healing become possible. Now, as I approach my 61st birthday, I find myself in a place I never expected to be, genuinely happy. Not because of my wealth, not because of my business success, but because I have authentic relationships with people who love me for who I am, not what I have. Sarah visits me twice a week now, sometimes with Marcus and James, sometimes alone. We talk about everything: business, family, her childhood, my regrets, her hopes for the future. She's asked me difficult questions about why I chose to hide my wealth, whether I was trying to punish her, whether I ever considered just being honest from the beginning. I've answered truthfully, admitting that my choices were complicated: part protection, part test, part fear, part pride. I wasn't entirely noble in my deception, and I wasn't entirely wrong either. The truth is messy and complex, just like people are. But what matters is that we're talking now. We're honest now. And we're building something real. The Chen Jackson Family Foundation held its first graduation ceremony last month. 15 working-class adults completed our Business Basics program, ready to launch their own small enterprises or advance in their current careers. Sarah gave the commencement speech, and I sat in the audience with Marcus and James, listening to my daughter share her story. 6 months ago, she told the graduates, I was the worst version of myself. I valued money over people, status over character, and comfort over growth. I treated my own father, a man who had quietly built an empire while working as a maintenance man, like he was trash. I called him a fat pig in front of 200 people. The room was silent as she spoke, her voice strong and clear. But my father did something remarkable. Instead of simply revealing his wealth and humiliating me in return, he created a situation that forced me to examine my values, my choices, and my character. He gave me the opportunity to choose who I wanted to be, not by making it easy, but by making it hard. She paused, looking directly at me in the audience. That's what real love does. It doesn't protect you from the consequences of your actions. It doesn't enable your worst behaviors. It challenges you to become your best self, even when that process is painful. There wasn't a dry eye in the room, including mine. After the ceremony, several graduates approached me to thank me for funding the program, but I redirected their gratitude to Sarah. I provided the money, I told them, but your teacher provided something much more valuable: the wisdom that comes from genuine transformation. Listen to her, learn from her journey, and remember that your past doesn't determine your future unless you let it. As I drove home that night, with the city lights reflecting off my car windows, I thought about the question that has haunted me throughout this entire experience. Was my 30-year deception justified? Was the pain I caused Sarah through my secrecy proportional to the pain she caused me through her cruelty? I still don't have a perfect answer. What I do know is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to rescue someone from the consequences of their actions. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is the opportunity for genuine growth, even when that growth requires pain. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is be completely honest about who you are, even when that honesty makes you vulnerable. So I ask you again, as I close this chapter of my story, in your own life, are you being honest about who you really are? Are you hiding parts of yourself out of fear or pride? Are you treating the people around you, especially those who seem invisible or insignificant, with the respect they deserve? Because here's what I've learned through 30 years of living a double life and 6 months of living as my complete self. We're all more than we appear to be on the surface. The maintenance man might be a secret millionaire. The cruel daughter might be capable of profound transformation. The greatest treasures in life aren't found in bank accounts, but in honest relationships and genuine love. And the only way to access those treasures is to have the courage to be completely, vulnerably, honestly yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm Robert Chen, also known as RJ Chen, also known as Bobby, also known as Dad, also known as Grandpa. And I'm finally, after 60 years, exactly who I was always meant to be, just myself. This is Granny's voice, reminding you that every person has a story worth hearing, every life has value worth seeing, and every heart has love worth sharing. See you in the next story, with love and respect.